Coming up on Bridge City News, the province announced that there will be new COVID-19 testing for Canadian travelers returning to Alberta. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says the Liberals have to stop playing games while the Tories are doing their job as the official opposition. And U.S. President Donald Trump paints a gloomy picture for Americans if Joe Biden is elected on November 3rd.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney and other UCP members are self-isolating after one of his cabinet ministers tested positive for COVID-19. Kenney said he himself tested negative, but he'll continue to self-isolate and work from home until next Thursday. The Premier went into self-isolation late yesterday after learning that Municipal Affairs Minister Tracy Allard was infected. Other MLAs who are also self-isolating include Transportation Minister Rick McIver and Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf. Neudorf talks about what he's been through.
Wednesday afternoon, I was notified that a person I had close contact with was tested positive for COVID-19. So following public health guidelines, I immediately went into isolation. I received a call from AHS, and like over 1 million other Albertans went for testing this morning. Waiting results. I feel great, but I want to keep my colleagues in both the communities of Lethbridge and Edmonton safe, and will continue to isolate for the full recommended period and be in touch with AHS pending my results.
The government of Alberta announced today that there will be new rapid COVID-19 testing for Canadian travelers returning to our province. It is a pilot project involving both the province and the Government of Canada.
We will be taking all necessary health precautions during this pilot. Officials at the ministry as well as at AHS have worked closely with their federal colleagues to make sure that it is as safe as possible, both for travelers and for Albertans at large. Officials will be closely monitoring every participant to limit any risk of them creating increased exposure to Albertans. As the Premier noted, in addition to getting tested twice, each person will have to provide daily symptom check-ins, and they will also need to follow other enhanced preventative measures, like wearing face masks in public places, avoiding high-risk settings where vulnerable Albertans may reside, and should symptoms appear at any point, these travelers will be required to isolate and contact Alberta Health Services immediately.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says the new pilot project Alberta is launching will test whether 14 days is the best length of time to quarantine someone upon entering Canada. Rapid COVID-19 tests will soon be available in Calgary and at the Coots border crossing.
So this research project essentially will test arrivals at the border within a time frame that will allow us to better understand the nature of the length of quarantine. You know, we've been using a 14-day quarantine out of the principle of precaution. Essentially, 14 days is the longest period of time where someone, if they've been exposed to the virus, will become symptomatic. And of course, 14 days poses an enormous challenge for people who are trying to travel from country to country. And so this pilot will give us a better sense about when we can test and have certainty that the person is in fact negative or free of COVID-19.
The Alberta government announced that 20,000 Albertans have now recovered from COVID-19. Officials say there are currently 112 people in hospital, including 18 in intensive care. Over the past 24 hours, there were 427 new cases identified. In total, there are now 3,519 active cases in the province. The Edmonton zone still leads the way with 1,718 active COVID-19 cases, followed by the Calgary zone with 1,260. In the Central Zone, which includes Red Deer, there are 126 active cases. Here in the South Zone, meanwhile, we have just 204 active cases, but 146 of them are here in Lethbridge. There are 19 in Lethbridge County, and Medicine Hat has just 5 active cases. The Alberta Teachers Association says some substitute teachers are choosing not to fill jobs left open by school staff in quarantine due to fears of COVID-19. Association President Jason Schilling says they are just trying to stay safe. The association represents around 44,000 teachers in public, separate, and francophone school divisions. Earlier this week, the Calgary Board of Education said it had 76 staff in quarantine, and the Calgary Catholic School District says it has 78 staff in isolation. The head of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is questioning a recommendation in a leaked draft of proposed curriculum changes in Alberta. The draft says kids in kindergarten through grade 4 should not be taught about residential schools because it would be too traumatic. But Senator Murray Sinclair says it is clear that a curriculum could be developed without causing children any emotional damage. The Alberta government says the proposals are just recommendations that will go to a working group of teachers later this fall. NDP ethics critic Charlie Angus says the Liberals need to start showing that they're wanting to work with the opposition parties rather than just saying it. The Conservatives are calling for a sweeping probe by the House of Commons Health Committee into a host of issues related to the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Government has been filibustering the work. They were not wanting to work. Is it reasonable in the timelines to get these documents? You come back to the committee and say, well, listen, we're trying to get these documents, but it may take longer. That's what a reasonable government does. You can't filibuster a health committee in the midst of a pandemic. It's ridiculous. It just sends a really bad message. You know, in March, I was very, very proud of our Prime Minister and the way he seemed to be handling COVID, and we were all going to work together, and we had established a special committees so that we could actually ask longer questions, and all that's gone out the window.
Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel-Garner's motion seeking thousands of pages of documents on Canada's response to COVID-19 doesn't allow enough time to produce them. That's according to Health Minister Patty Hajdu. Hajdu would not say how much time they actually need.
Mr. Speaker, I've been really heartened as a parliamentarian to see collaboration with opposition parties on coming up with a very common sense, nonpartisan motion to review the government's response to COVID-19 so we can chart a firm path forward to get people back to work while keeping people safe. Government isn't so willing. Look, we've likely got the support of opposition parties. So in the spirit of collaboration, I'm asking the health minister, because she said that a 15-day timeline was not reasonable to produce documents in a scrum earlier today. What is a reasonable timeline?
Look, the government is willing to work with the opposition to come up with a timeline that is reasonable, that will get to the goal of understanding what we need to do going forward. Mr. Speaker, I think the member opposite is right, that when we work together, Canadians appreciate it and our response is stronger.
Closer to home, faith groups across Lethbridge are advocating for local homeless populations to get warm as temperatures plunge below zero. As Loris Alexander explains now, the most vulnerable need our help now more than ever.
Homeless people who are scantily clad in frigid temperatures is a common sight.
They just have little sweaters on, hey? They come here to the shelter, to the Streets Alive to get sweaters, but still, when you go to the shelter, no, you have to take it off. It's really hard for us people. Really, it is. I cry when I go in there.
Formerly homeless, Horvat shares her first-hand experience of spending her days in the bitter cold.
Winter is really rough. Like, there's nowhere, especially during COVID, where the homeless population can just kind of warm up and relax. So they've got the shelter and whatnot where they can sleep, but they gotta vacate first thing in the morning and then they're out.
Leo will not be sleeping in a warm place, at least for the next 5 nights.
Well, 3 days ago I was taking a shower and one of the ladies in there came in there and trying to rush me out of there, and I was telling her to get out, and she wouldn't get out, so then I turned and go, get that F out of here, and she still wouldn't get out. So I threw my towel at her. So all you want to show, here you go, and I threw the towel at her, and then off that, they kicked me out, banned me for 5 days.
When asked what he will do to stay warm, Leo didn't have much of an answer.
I don't know, pretty much I don't like sitting around too much because then my body gets cold, and so I go stand by one of those things, warm up a bit, and just start walking around. Pretty much walk around all night.
So how can you help keep someone warm?
Warm clothing is important, and the ability to layer. More often than not, it's more than just one jacket and one whatever. They're putting on multiple layers to stay warm, multiple layers of pants, socks, weatherproof, warm insulated shoes, boots.
You see them on the streets, just hand it to them. There's nothing wrong with that either. So you see someone who needs it, just give them what they need.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
With snowfall comes tire changes, and that means a mad rush to head to the local dealership to get new tires. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains now, before you head out, it's important to educate yourself on the difference between the tires.
all season, all weather, and winter tires. It can be hard to figure out the best tires for your vehicle during the winter season.
Decades ago, of course, we came up with the all-season tire, which was a great advantage because it moved from our regular summer and winter tires. The all-season tire gave us the ability to have good traction year-round, and the customer didn't have to go through the biannual changeover. Then we moved to the all-weather tires, which is a good compromise between the all-season and the winter tires, but not quite as good as the winter, but better than the all-season. Now what we've done with the technology of the vehicles, we've got anti-lock brakes, we've got everything that we can do to keep this car handling and being safe and reliable. But they've got low-profile tires on them, and with that we lose traction. So now we have the snow tire, the true winter tire, that's come back in full force because of a lack of traction.
Brain says Dunlop Ford Sales in Lethbridge is doing 15 to 20 tire swaps per day.
And that's putting us about 3 or 4 days out to make an appointment. Of course, it's really hard for anybody to predict when to put them on. So when the snow flies, we get a lot of phone calls every day, probably over 100 calls a day looking for service. And we've got 17 technicians working, but it's still too many that we can handle with same-day service.
Brain says the beginning of October is actually when you should plan to change your tires over to winter ones.
Yeah, a couple of months is a little bit too far in advance because the winter tire has a softer rubber compound, so they do wear out a little bit faster than your regular all-season tire. So it's a little bit of a balance as to when to do it, but we know snow's going to happen.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
With the stress of COVID-19, Lethbridge Family Services worries that the Christmas season will be much harder on families this year. That's why they're getting a head start on gathering donations for their annual Angel Tree fundraiser. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, one local coffee shop is stepping up with donations of their own.
We are really worried about our families who need Christmas more than they've ever needed Christmas before.
Lethbridge Family Services expects 3,000 local children will be in need of gift bundles for the Angel Tree campaign this year. The group will be partnering with the Salvation Army and My City Care for an entirely virtual gift-giving campaign.
I'm not going to lie, we're worried because of the needs. So we're hoping the community can help us out like they've done every year.
Cuppers Coffee in Lethbridge saw the need and is going to help by curating specific items for each age group. Customers will purchase the items and Cuppers will deliver them to LFS.
Especially when there's so few of these trees out right now, like a lot of the churches aren't open that people would get them from. They're just, the opportunity is gone. They went from 250 pickup and drop-off points to I think about 75. So it's a huge cut, plus double the number of families involved.
One of the items is a children's book from a Vancouver writer whose roots are in Lethbridge. Both the writer and Cuppers are happy to give back.
I think it's an ideal gift for right now, and picture books are always something that I think is good to give to parents and teachers and guardians, loved ones, things like that, but right now especially.
You can go into Cuppers in person to buy the book or visit cuppers.ca to donate online. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The Southern Alberta Ethnic Association has launched a new initiative called the SAEA COVID-19 Assistance Relief Program. It's to help those in our community during these trying times. Santos Timsini is the group's program coordinator, and he says the pandemic has affected everyone in our community, including newcomers, and they need our support as well.
The pandemic has come to us, and it's all been difficult for everybody, including newcomers. And so people are struggling right now with their employment, with family issues and financial burdens and stuff. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach out to the people who are in need, newcomers and also immigrants and everybody who are in needing help, let's say to apply for the employment insurance or to help find a job, or if somebody's needing PPEs and stuff like that. We're trying to help them out, even with the referrals for the counseling and stuff like that.
Timsini says if you're a newcomer in need of assistance, to give them a call right away at 403-320-1577. The Saskatchewan Union of Nurses is calling on people to better follow public health rules following an increase in COVID-19 cases. Saskatchewan now has 427 active cases, which is a new record for the province. Many are in Saskatoon and are linked to outbreaks at local nightclubs. A spokesperson for the Nurses Union is urging people to only go out when necessary and to wear a mask when physical distancing is not possible. When it comes to battling COVID-19, doctors are delving deeper into how our bodies naturally fight the virus. Dr. Francisco Delgado, who works at a major hospital in Indianapolis, Indiana, is studying how sentinel cells help protect the body from the novel coronavirus.
Those cells will essentially attack that pathogen. They will break it down into multiple small pieces. They will essentially sort out which pieces of that pathogen can be useful or can be the Achilles heel of that pathogen. And then they present those portions, those pieces of the pathogen to other cells and tell them, listen, this is what you're going to be looking for, so mount a response.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Delgado discussing how close we are to seeing a COVID-19 vaccine coming up later in our program. On the eve of the final presidential debate of the 2020 campaign, U.S. President Donald Trump painted a dystopian picture of the United States under Joe Biden.
Sleepy Joe Biden has handed control of his party over to socialists, communists, Marxists, and left-wing extremists, and they're filled with hatred, venom, and rage. But the first thing Washington Democrats will do if Biden gets elected is pack the Supreme Court with radical left judges who will eliminate your Second Amendment and many other things.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama made his first in-person campaign pitch for Joe Biden in Pennsylvania. He warned voters not to be complacent and encouraged voters to turn out like never before.
Philadelphia, we got 13 days. That's our lucky number right here. 13 days until the most important election of our lifetimes. This election requires every single one of us to do our part. And what we do these next 13 days will matter for decades to come.
The state of California is letting fans in outdoor stadiums once again where coronavirus infections are low. But when it comes to Disneyland, it's still closed. That's dealing a major blow to businesses which operate near the theme park.
I can't believe it because Florida's flourishing and they're still trying to do their best, but California is just ridiculous. These theme parks are just getting hammered.
Yeah, they should be open. And they should be open because they're really hurting a lot of people by being closed.
It was just an unbelievably emotional day yesterday. I couldn't believe how we were anticipating the governor to allow Disneyland to open. And instead, he slapped us up, the whole entire neighborhood down and saying no. And he's giving these goals that are just unrealistic. It's just my business and these businesses around me and the hotels were put here just solely to ride the coattails of Disneyland's success. On a normal day and a good day, I mean average, I would be upset if I didn't do $3,000 in business. And right now I'm doing $300 a day.
It's hard to believe that it's supposed to be fall right now when we've had so much snow here in southwestern Alberta and more flurries are in the forecast. Full weather details are coming up. The snowfall warning for our region has ended, but when it comes to the white stuff, we're not out of the woods just yet. Jeanette Roche is here now with a look at the long-range forecast. Jeanette, more snow is on the way, but beginning next week, the meltdown should begin?
Yeah, that's right. We actually just got to get through this weekend, and then we're going to be into the clear for next week, and we're even going to see some double-digit temperatures. But like I said, first we got to contend with tonight, which we could see some flurries this evening. Minus 15 is the overnight low, but it might feel chillier than that with the wind chill. Into tomorrow, same thing, 30% chance of flurries. Minus 9, the high could feel a little bit colder with that wind chill. Minus 12, the overnight low. As we get into the weekend, periods of snow expected on a Saturday. High of only minus 10 here. And then Sunday, we got some sunshine. Minus 7, the high. But look at what's happening later on next week. As we get even into Monday, we're going to see the temperature rise to the pluses, 2 degrees. That will probably feel warm enough compared to what we're dealing with over here on the weekend. Sunshine Monday, and then look what happens on Tuesday and Wednesday. We're getting into those double digits. 12, the high for Tuesday. Wednesday, the high is 14 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Now that 14 degrees is a little bit more about what we should be seeing for our seasonal average highs right here. According to the ALMANAC, 13 is the average high. Minus 1, the average low. The high temperature on this day was 25 back in 1999. The lowest temperature was -13. It was right here in 1951. 8:04 is when the sun got up this morning, and 6:27 p.m. is our Thursday evening sunset time. So there you go. What is that? Just a little bit less than 10.5 hours of sunlight. Looking to the west coast for our highs tomorrow, they should see some precipitation there. High of 8 degrees in Victoria, 7 for Vancouver, -7 for Edmonton. Chance of flurries. There could be some snow expected tomorrow as well in Calgary with a high of -10. Now, as we look into the rest of the prairies here, Saskatoon, mix of sun and clouds, same thing for Regina. -7 is the high, but it's going to feel a little bit chillier for you guys with that wind chill. -2 the high for Winnipeg, and they could see a chance of flurries tomorrow as well. Now it's almost like we're in a completely different country as we look to the temperatures in central Canada. Can you believe Toronto's actually going to have a humidex of 28 degrees tomorrow? 21 the high for Ottawa with a chance of showers. Same thing for Montreal. They could see shower activity as well. Now, Fredericton's high 14. Lots of sunshine here, tons of sunshine in the East Coast for you, all our friends in the Maritimes there. 12 is the high for Charlottetown. Halifax high 13, and 8 degrees the high for St. John's, Newfoundland with a mix of sun and cloud. There you go. Those are tomorrow's highs.
JBS Foods Canada started a new initiative called Hometown Strong that will be investing back into the Brooks economy. The company is giving $2 million to help out parts of the community that have been hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic. JBS has been meeting with local leaders to determine where the money will be best placed, and the announcement for where the money will be allocated will come by the end of the year.
There's not one area. It could be infrastructure, could be something COVID-19 related for relief. Where should this money go? It's easy to say we're going to give the money and then it just, okay, that's great. But it seems like when we went down inside the communities, we start talking to the community leaders and saying, what do you need? Much bigger impact on those communities. So that's why we made it Hometown Strong, and we're driving the money back in the community. It's not allocated in our corporate office, it's allocated in those communities.
JBS Foods Canada has over 2,800 employees and an annual payroll of more than $110 million. Union officials are calling for the Olymel pork processing plant located outside of Quebec City to be closed after 40 workers tested positive for COVID-19. One person has also died. The company says it is not clear if the worker's death was COVID-19 related. Quebec is reporting 1,033 new cases of COVID-19 today and another 20 deaths. Ontario, meanwhile, is reporting another 841 active cases. High-profile streaming service Quibi is closing down. The company says it is due to subscriber troubles. Less than 7 months after Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman launched Quibi to the remake of the business short-form video, the streaming service is closing its doors. Katzenberg and Whitman told investors that the company, which raised $1.75 billion to tackle the growing digital video market, will wind down after failing to attract viewers willing to pay to watch its shows. The Hollywood-based Quibi, which employed 265 people, plans to use its remaining cash of about $350 million to pay back investors. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 49 points on the day to 16,279. The Dow was up 152 points to 28,363. The S&P 500 was up 17 points to 3453, and the Nasdaq was up 21 points on the day to 11,506. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 57 cents to $40.60 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to $2.99. Gold was up 2 cents to $19.0412 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $24.72 US an ounce. Wheat is at $272 per metric ton, barley's at $270, canola's at $5.45, and corn is at $277 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.10 to $103.48. Feeder cattle were down 73 cents to $130.43, and lean hogs were down $3 to $66.20. The Canadian dollar was up ever so slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.13 US.
Today's market numbers are brought to you by The Meat Box, your local butcher where quality matters.
Recapping one of our top stories this hour, a joint pilot program with the Government of Alberta and Ottawa will be launched on November 2nd for international travelers. COVID-19 testing will be offered initially at 2 ports of entry into Canada, the Coutts Land Border Crossing and the Calgary International Airport. Travelers will receive a coronavirus test upon entry into Canada before proceeding into quarantine. Once a test comes back negative, they'll be allowed to leave their place of quarantine as long as they commit to getting a second test on day 6 or 7 after arrival. The COVID-19 pandemic has been ongoing for more than half a year now. Coming up, we chat with a doctor who specializes in viruses to discuss how close we are to a vaccine and how effective treatments really are. Catch that full 50-minute Q&A with Dr. Francisco Delgado in just a moment. But first, here's what's happening in and around your community.
Here is your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to a lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Do you or someone you love struggle with a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Thursdays at 6 at 408 13th Street North. For more information, call 403-331-0822 or visit albertaga.net. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and see a railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. The museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. Mobility scooters are available to guests by donation. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
We are still being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Researchers are continuing their search for a vaccine. In the meantime, there are treatments being used on those infected and continued hopes that our own immune systems can do the job to fight off the novel coronavirus. Dr. Francisco Delgado is a chair for a very special stewardship committee at one of the major hospitals in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that's where he teaches about internal medicine. Dr. Delgado, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you for the invitation to be with you.
Oh, not a problem. Now, when you first heard of COVID-19, what were your thoughts and what did you think about the symptoms and the virus as a whole?
We had a little bit of background from the first coronavirus that was called SARS, SARS #1, which I think you were closer to because you had some cases up all the way to Toronto. So we knew a little bit what to expect. We just didn't have a lot of information in the very beginning to know how much of a problem this was going to be, and it turns out it was a lot more problematic than we were expecting. Yes.
Has the virus mutated in any way as it's gone from person to person?
The viruses change their genetic material. So when you talk about mutations, there are always mutations within viruses. Those mutations are usually very small. Really, at this point, not clinically significant, meaning that those mutations do not, we cannot talk about different viruses per se. There's just small changes in the genetic material of the virus. So in a way, yes, it is mutating, but the mutations are not significant at this point.
Is there one vaccine that can really wipe out the entire virus?
We hope so, but it's not here yet.
Now, what's currently happening in the pursuit to create a vaccine for COVID-19?
Well, what's happening? There's a lot of vaccines that are that are being evaluated. Last I heard, there's about 44 or something different candidates. Only a few of them have reached what we call clinical studies. That means being given to people to see if it works. They are, we still are trying to figure out if those vaccines are safe and if they can be produced in enough quantities to reach essentially all of the world.
So, Dr. Delgado, what treatments are they currently using on patients that have extreme COVID-19 cases?
So the severe coronavirus cases are the ones that essentially land in the hospital that require significant amounts of oxygen for people to survive. And unfortunately, we don't have that many treatments. So far, we know that steroids can help some people. There has been an antiviral that was given what we call an emergency use authorization. The latest articles that are coming out are not very optimistic because they don't seem to have the benefit that we were hoping that that they had. So we really are very limited on the treatments that we have for coronavirus at this point in time. That's why we are trying to look for other alternatives that could help us treat the virus in a more effective way.
Now, in a recent article, you stated that researchers are making progress by mimicking the immune system's operation, highlighting the elegant and sophisticated design of the immune system. Can you explain?
Sure. The way that the body attacks virus or controls viruses is this way. The body will produce something called antibodies, which are proteins. And these proteins will bind to the virus and essentially render it inactive. That is the way that the body essentially protects us against viruses. One of the principles behind using what we call convalescent plasma, which is another possible treatment modality, is essentially that we collect the antibodies from a person who has recovered from the coronavirus. We isolate the portion of the blood that has those antibodies, and then we transfuse it to patients that are infected with the virus, hoping that there are enough antibodies that will bind the virus and render it inactive. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of good data also from this kind of approach. So one of the things that we are trying to do is to see if companies that have isolated those antibodies, which are called neutralizing antibodies, if we're able to find the right antibody and give it to a person that is sick, then those antibodies will bind to the virus and essentially render it inactive.
Can you offer up a better understanding of how bodies are designed to literally combat viruses using something called sentinel cells?
Yes, the immune system, I gotta tell you, it is extremely complicated. And the way that essentially this happens is once you are exposed to, let's say, a virus, a bacteria, there are cells that will recognize that something is not supposed to be there. Those cells will essentially attack that pathogen. They will break it down into multiple small pieces. They will essentially sort out which pieces of that pathogen can be useful or can be the Achilles heel of that pathogen. And then they present those portions, those pieces of the pathogen to other cells and tell them, listen, this is what you're going to be looking for, so mount a response against this kind of a pathogen. Okay, is this kind of structure if you see it around the body.
So Dr. Delgado, as much as we know about other viruses, what's the unique challenge when it comes to COVID-19 specifically? What sets it apart?
Yes, the challenge is, first of all, a time-wise challenge. The more we go through this pandemic, there is going to be a lot more deaths, number one. We will find some alternatives to combat this virus in the future, but this is really more of a time, a race against time. If you take, for example, another virus like the HIV virus, right now we have been able to produce a lot of medications that control the virus very well, but it has taken us more than 30 years to get to this point. Of course, the death toll from HIV is very high. So we're facing the same scenario with a virus that is actually killing people in a much faster way than HIV. So that's why the challenge is more a race against time at this point.
Now, when it comes to the virus, doctor, living on things like a piece of paper or maybe metal on a door handle on a car, or if you go to a clinic, how long does it actually live and how does it survive?
Yes, it depends on the surface that you're talking about. There are several studies that put out, there's anywhere between 1 and 8 hours, depends on what kind of a surface you are considering. Despite the fact that the virus lives for several hours on surfaces, it doesn't seem to be the main route of transmission. So you could be touching stuff that is contaminated, but unless you put that stuff directly in your nose, in your mouth, in your eyes, then really the chances for you getting infected are going to be rather low.
So, I mean, if we're social distancing or physically distancing 2 meters apart, about 6 feet, plus having the masks on, chances are we're not going to catch the COVID-19 virus.
That is correct. That is correct. Distancing and protection of eyes, mouth, and nose is very important to prevent transmission.
So, doctor, in your opinion, will the virus ever be completely eradicated, or will we have to learn with it, like you mentioned earlier, like with SARS or maybe with the flu?
That's a very good question, and it is very difficult to tell at this point in time. The first SARS coronavirus 1, for unknown reasons, essentially disappeared from the face of the earth. So we have not been able to, to find that same virus right now. Will that happen with this coronavirus? It doesn't sound plausible because it's already all over the place. A possibility is that this virus will be living in a small percentage of the population in areas of the world, throughout history, really. We don't know yet, but that is a very interesting question. We don't have an answer yet.
As a medical doctor that has had so much experience working with viruses, what motivated you to conclude your article by saying that our bodies speak loudly about the exquisite design of our immune system and that we are fearfully and wonderfully made?
Monoclonal antibodies, what we're trying to use to fight this virus, is actually mimicking something that the body does, which is essentially manufacturing antibodies that are going to inactivate the virus. The interesting part is that our body takes only days to manufacture these antibodies, whereas it's taken us months to even get something that we can try on people safely. And this effort has involved multiple researchers throughout the world. So multiple minds essentially trying to mimic what the body does. It essentially speaks of a fascinating amount of design of the immune system.
As a Christian working in the field of infectious diseases, how has that really impacted your faith? And how are you able to harmonize your faith with science?
Yes. This is a question that has a lot of aspects to it. Part of the issue with infectious diseases, you could say, is part of the issue on why people get sick and what is the issue with suffering? How come they're suffering? So we could go on that side, but essentially my role, my calling has been to help those people that are suffering. I like the idea of infectious diseases, and the reason I became an infectious disease specialist is because it has a very tangible impact. We can really cure a lot of diseases with our antibiotics and essentially transform people's lives. At one point, infectious diseases was the main killer of humans, and with all the advances in modern medicine, we've been able to turn that around. Yes, there's still a lot of ground to cover, but we really have made a big impact on infectious diseases.
Dr. Delgado, let me ask you something. Some people are saying all of the wildfires we're experiencing up and down the U.S. West Coast, some of the flooding taking place and different viruses, including the novel coronavirus, are all signs of the end times. What are your thoughts?
I probably wouldn't go that far. I think that there are many of these things that we're seeing that have happened throughout time. And again, I would be very difficult to conclude that this is the end. This is the end of everything. I do not think that we would have the full picture to conclude that.
Dr. Francisco Delgado, thanks a lot for your efforts in the medical community, and thanks again for joining me on Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for the invitation again.
Do you need some health advice? Well, today's guest regularly sees patients who struggle with many different health conditions. Dr. Clayton Cogano, a naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. He also has training in conventional medicine with a Bachelor of Science in Exercise Science, Kinesiology, and 3 years of research on radiation and cancer at the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Cogano, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, first of all, talk about your approach to finding solutions for the health struggles so many of us face on a daily basis.
Well, I guess in my office, I see a lot of different various things. You always want to try and get to the root cause of the problem when they come in, because a lot of patients that I see have been unable to figure out what's wrong with them. And so the very first thing that I want to do is sit down with them, take a long time to go through all of their health history, all their medical history, all their labs. And you want to kind of sort through all of that and then figure out from there a plan moving forward. A lot of time it's history taking, and then further to that, further lab testing, either more in-depth lab testing or even just your general lab testing that just wasn't done. Often you can figure it out.
Now, you've said that in your daily practice, you sometimes come across chronic fatigue with a lot of your patients now. How common is chronic fatigue in today's society, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Honestly, people put too much on their plates. People are very busy. That's one of the main reasons for chronic fatigue. There's a lot of other reasons, but it is extremely common in my practice. Yeah.
What are some of the causes of chronic fatigue? Like you said, being very busy, not getting enough rest, perhaps?
Yeah, and it kind of compiles onto other things. When stress is elevated, often people aren't sleeping well. Sometimes people can have other issues like perhaps low B12, blood sugar irregularities, low iron. So it's important to, in my opinion, even thyroid issues, and sometimes thyroid issues can get missed. So it's important to test things and test things in depth. And look at the complete history of what's going on and what's been going on in order to figure it out.
So what are some of the effective treatments outside of B12 and maybe cutting some of the stress out of our lives?
Well, it completely varies. Like a lot of times, if someone's having trouble sleeping, you have to try and start figuring out why they can't sleep. If someone has, for example, a lot of stress, you can't just tell them to quit work if work is their big stressor. You have to try and figure out ways to work around it, against the grain sometimes. So the first thing is to figure out what's wrong. For example, if it was a cortisol issue, which tends to be the case with a lot of patients with chronic stress leading to chronic fatigue, a lot of times you will want to treat that with different vitamins and herbs. And then as that improves, you want to double check that you're not missing anything, like perhaps that person also has low iron or their thyroid isn't working properly. You have to treat the whole person in order to fix chronic fatigue. Otherwise, you'll get a patient that gets about 50% better and then plateaus.
You know, other people I've spoken to as well in the healthcare professionals saying, you know, focusing on God's word and meditating and breathing that helps a lot as well. How about certain foods when it comes to stress? Are there certain foods as well that you can eat that can really help?
Lifestyle change is massive. It is massive. It is also probably one of the most difficult things for me to help someone with. You can tell people all day long to do something here and do something there, but ultimately that's the hardest thing for me because it's up to them when they go home to do it. In terms of foods, yes, absolutely. Eating a healthful diet, eating a whole food diet, even looking into food sensitivities, that can create a ton of fatigue in people if they're battling the food that they're eating all the time. So it's important, again, to look into things and take a complete history, because what I find actually is clinically, people that are coming in, they're coming in with bags of supplements and they're still tired. And it's not a supplement deficiency in people. It's a multitude of system failures that's causing it, and you have to figure it out.
Dr. Cogano, many people also go through bouts of insomnia. They just can't get any sleep. What do you think causes that? Is it a big part of it is not putting your phone down when you go to bed at night?
Again, yeah, a lot of lifestyle changes. Yes, there absolutely is. A lot of people don't prepare for bed. You know, they have their TV in their bed, they're on their phone. It's a social area now versus an area just for sleep. And so that is a huge thing. There's other reasons as well for insomnia, and insomnia it can be a tricky thing. Sometimes breathing issues like sleep apnea can create patients that just don't get a restful sleep or not at all. Anxiety is a huge thing, and that goes hand in hand with chronic fatigue, and chronic stress in general leads to a lot of anxiety, in which we can help a lot with. And then there's other things like, for example, different neurological issues with the brain. Now, unfortunately, we can't test those. So that would be like, for example, a slight deficiency of melatonin or a slight deficiency of GABA, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain that stops the busy signal. But we don't know if it's one or the other or something else. And so in those cases, we have to guess with different herbs, different vitamins to try and fix it. Often you can, but it takes a couple tries for sure.
You know, I remember years ago, my doctor told me, yeah, the herbs and vitamins are good, but also at the same time, some warm milk. Is that still applied today, or maybe reading a book to help somebody fall asleep if you suffer from insomnia?
Oh yeah, well, I think the warm milk thing is more calming, right? I think. I don't know about that one, but I know that certain herbs like, you know, chamomile tea is really calming. Rosemary is very calming. Passion flower root specifically, you can drink it as a tea, you can take it as a supplement. It just makes you calm. It doesn't necessarily put you to sleep, but it helps get your body ready for sleep.
Consider using CBD oil or capsules as a treatment for insomnia?
Yeah, CBD, it's a fairly new thing, especially since the legalization process. A lot of doctors are now delving into more research on it. Some of the research is promising on CBD for quite a lot of things, neurological things especially. So I think in certain cases of, for example, neurological insomnia, where there might be a brain chemical imbalance, something going on, it may prove benefit. And more research, the jury is still kind of out on it. And in some cases, it's been shown to actually make sleep worse. And some people will actually get anxiety on it. And so I think it's a potential option for people, but they definitely should talk to their doctor about it before they just start taking anything, really. You want to be focused and accurate on what you're taking. That way, you end up just with better results overall.
Let's move on right now and talk about digestive health, Dr. Cogano, and let's talk specifically about the condition called leaky gut. What exactly is leaky gut?
Leaky gut is the general term for something called intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability. And what that means is that the enterocytes, or the cells in your small intestine, are slightly inflamed and irritated, and they're allowing larger protein particles of food to get into your bloodstream. And when a big piece of protein gets into your bloodstream, your body's not used to it. It's used to it being broken down to a certain size. So it sees it as foreign, and it starts to kind of attack it, and it can create an inflammatory response called an immunoglobulin response. And that can have widespread systemic effects on the body, meaning you could get anything from rosacea, eczema, psoriasis, acne, to chronic fatigue, to joint pain, to gut pain, to IBS. And so the testing for something like that is, I find, very beneficial to helping people who have a multitude of symptoms, especially those with gut issues like IBS, because irritable bowel syndrome is a diagnosis that doesn't tell anyone what the problem actually is. Most patients come into the office knowing their gut's irritated. So me telling them that they have irritable bowel syndrome does not help anyone. We have to try and figure it out. And one way to figure it out is through a blood test called an IgG blood test that can actually start looking at, oh, maybe what foods is this person sensitive to help them.
So what are some of the effective treatments for leaky gut?
I honestly, the first biggest thing is to try and figure out what foods or what product is irritating their gut and eliminate it. You have to get rid of the cause of the irritation. Sometimes the cause of the irritation is something more severe, like inflammatory bowel disease, like an autoimmune thing, maybe like celiac or heavy metal exposure, perhaps even antibiotics. So you got to get rid of whatever thing is irritating it first, and then you have to start working to heal the gut. And often I use a combination of L-glutamine and a high dose of omega-3, specifically a component in that called EPA, which is an anti-inflammatory. So you want a nice strong anti-inflammatory in the gut, and then you want glutamine, which helps to heal and bind the gut cells back together.
Now, there are many body cleanses in the market today. What do you think of those which claim to really cleanse your liver?
I think that there's overclaim to what a lot of them can do. I think that some will have benefit, but you also have to be careful. I just saw a patient just the other day that did a liver cleanse and ran into some serious issues because her liver didn't need it. And honestly, she even had some liver issues. I think that liver detoxes, and well, she didn't know, right? And so it ended up being an issue. I think you have to be cautious with it, but I think that the general idea behind it is positive. I think really it's meant to, detoxes, especially in the liver, are meant to improve circulations, maybe give your organs a little bit of a rest, improve toxic elimination, because that's what the liver does. So yes, you can absolutely do that. Provide your body with better nutrients, and even just increasing circulation, and really that's what a detox should be all about, is improving health, not depleting the body of a bunch of things.
We talk about alcohol potentially damaging the liver. How about certain foods that may have the same effect?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of different foods that can damage the liver. Certainly you want to make sure that you're eating a healthful diet and a whole foods diet. And I find that the biggest thing is variety in the diet, because the liver itself is like a giant filter. So the more healthy whole foods, antioxidant foods that you're eating, the better it's going to function.
So a lot of berries, blueberries, raspberries, right? That really helps?
Exactly. The nice thing about the liver is it is one of the only things in your body that can regenerate. So if it's down to a quarter functionality, it will regenerate to 100%. But the biggest catch-22 with that is that often what we see is that people that have a liver capacity that's so low, they're often alcoholics or they're drug addicts, or they have issues that they cannot stop. So it often continues the decline. However, if you start treating your body healthfully, then that is one organ that can regenerate.
When is a good time for a detox? Any symptoms to look for that would signal that you need to do a detox? And I'm not talking about drugs or alcohol specifically here.
Oh, yeah. So in terms of timing, often if I'm going to tell a patient to do a detox, because detoxes can be a little bit depleting, often I say spring or summer. I find a lot of people are already extra fatigued in the winter. There's more disease going around, more influenza. And so you want to make sure that you're more boosting your body up in the winter. I think that spring and summer, you're a little bit more energetic. Your body's a little bit better to handle something like that. So timing wise, that's definitely when you want to be doing them. Yeah.
What are some of the benefits of probiotics? There are different doses of probiotics. Now, do you go for one with the most?
No, you have to be careful with probiotics. It's also sort of an area that we don't fully understand yet in medicine. It's a fairly new thing in medicine, probiotics. We know that they're beneficial and they have lots of health benefits, but the microbiome in our gut is extremely complex. And there's certain times where you don't want to take a probiotic. For example, when I'm doing a gut healing protocol for leaky gut, right? I often now don't give a probiotic with it. And the reason is because sometimes people with gut issues also have other things along with it, perhaps candida, which is yeast or fungal overgrowth, or even something else called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And if the person has those things and we haven't tested them to rule them out, then a probiotic actually would make those conditions worse, and it would actually make the person feel worse. But by and large and in general, a probiotic for most people is safe, it's effective, it can boost up your immune system, and you don't need a massive quantity. A lower dose of probiotic typically is just fine, and you just want a multi-strain. So often you want to replete it with 11 to 12 billion or 11 to 12 different types of bacteria.
Dr. Clayton Coggino, naturopathic doctor in Lethbridge with Well Vitality Health Clinic. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Hal. Take care.
You too. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.